So imagine this. You're doing everything right. You copy the top build, your rotation is clean, your stats are optimized. So, why does your build feel weak the moment a real fight starts? Seriously, why does it feel like you're hitting but nothing is actually dying? That feeling right there, that's not you being bad. That's the game not matching what you built for. And that's what we need to talk about today. Right now in ESO, there's a huge disconnect between build theory and actual combat. And most players don't even realize it's happening. Because everything you see, from guides to videos to parses to spreadsheets, they're all built around perfect conditions. From perfect uptime, to perfect rotations, to perfect scenarios. But the game itself isn't like that. Combat now is faster, more reactive, way more punishing, and honestly, just more chaotic. So what ends up happening is you take a build that only works when everything goes right into a fight where everything is going wrong, and it falls apart every time. Now here's where I want to separate this, because PvE and PvP both have this issue, but they fail in completely different ways. So let's start with PvE. In PvE, the biggest thing messing people up right now is parses, and I'm not saying parsing is bad necessarily, but people are misunderstanding what it actually tells you. A parse is your maximum potential in a controlled environment. That is it. It's not your real damage, it's not your average damage, and it definitely isn't your performance in a fight. Because think about what a target dummy actually is. It doesn't move, it doesn't fight back, it doesn't force mechanics, and it doesn't make you react. You just stand there and execute perfectly. And yeah, you might hit 120k, 130k, whatever, but go into something like a dungeon or a trial and suddenly you're dodging mechanics, you're repositioning, you're switching targets, you're dealing with interrupts, and you're trying not to die. And your rotation, it's already scuffed. And this is why a lot of in-game trial leads want to see not just parses, but portal POVs before they allow you into their content. It's because parsing's just one aspect of the game. How you perform is way more important than your parse. So, your rotation's already scuffed, you miss a light attack, you delay a skill, a dot falls off, and you bar swap late. And that stuff, that type of stuff exactly is what stacks up, okay? People don't realize how brutal that drop off actually is. You don't go from 120k to like 110k. You go from 120k to 80k to 70k, sometimes even lower depending on the fight. And here's the part that really messes people up. The more optimized your build is for damage, the less forgiving it becomes. Because those builds assume perfect uptime. They're tuned so tightly around best case scenario that the moment you lose even a little bit of efficiency, the whole thing starts to collapse. So now you're in a real fight, doing everything you can just to stay alive and keep up, and your build feels weak. Not because it is weak, but because it's fragile. And that's the real PvE problem right now. People are building for their best moment instead of their worst one. Because your best moment is your parse, but your worst moment, that's when your build actually gets tested. Now, let's flip over to PvP. Because this is where people get straight up frustrated. This is where you hear, I hit my full combo and nothing happened. I'm doing damage but nobody dies. And yeah, that's real. But it's not random. There's a reason for it. PvP right now is heavily defensive. Way more than people give it credit for. Players have access to high resistances, damage reduction, constant healing, shields, and defensive cooldowns. So when you hit someone, your damage just doesn't go straight through. It gets processed, and I mean that literally. It goes through layers. First it hits their resistances, then any damage reduction they have, then they heal it, and then they recover. So by the time your burst actually lands, it's already being countered. And that's why it feels like you're hitting hard, but nothing is happening. And here's where people make the mistake. They think the solution is more damage. So they stack more weapon damage, more crit, more pin, trying to break through it. But that's just not how it works anymore. Because just like offense has scaling, well, defense has scaling too. And in a lot of cases right now, defense is winning. So what happens when you build full damage in PvP? You get one shot at a kill. One combo. And if that combo doesn't work, now you're stuck. No sustain, no defense, no recovery, And the other player, they're still alive, still healing, and now you're the one under pressure. That's why fights feel like you're losing even when you're doing damage, because you're trading everything for a moment that never actually pays off. And that leads into the bigger issue that both PvE and PvP share. Even though they look completely different, they're both suffering from the same core problem: over-optimization. In PvE, you over-optimize for damage and lose it the second uptime drops. In PvP, you over-optimize for burst and lose the moment it gets mitigated. Different outcomes, but it's the same mistake. ESO isn't rewarding perfection anymore, it's rewarding consistency, and consistency comes from builds that can handle things going wrong, not just when everything goes right. So what actually works right now? And this is where people get thrown off because it doesn't look impressive on paper. The strongest builds right now are balanced. Not max damage, not full tank, somewhere in the middle. They have sustain so they can keep fighting. They have survivability so they don't fall over the second something hits them. Also Pete me dying there. They have flexibility so they can respond instead of just committing. And most importantly, they apply consistent pressure, not one big burst, not one perfect rotation, but constant output over time. And I know that's not exciting to a lot of people. It's not as flashy as big numbers or crazy combos, but it works, especially in the current state of the game. So if your build feels weak right now, here's what I would actually change. First, pull back on damage. Not a ton, but enough to give yourself room elsewhere. And second, add sustain. If you're running out of resources, you're already losing. Doesn't matter how much damage you could do if you can't maintain it. And third, give yourself defensive options. That could be healing, mitigation, mobility, whatever fits your class, but you need something to stabilize fights. And fourth, simplify where you can. A slightly less optimal rotation that you can maintain under pressure is better than a perfect one that can fall apart pretty easily. Because at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. In PvE, the player who maintains damage through mechanics performs better than the player with the highest parse. And in PvP, the player who survives longer and applies pressure over time wins more fights than the player chasing one perfect burst. ESO didn't just change numbers, it changed what it rewards, and right now, it rewards players who can adapt when things stop going perfectly. So if your build feels weak, it's probably not because it's bad, it's because it was built for a version of the game that doesn't exist anymore. If you fix that, then your build will start feeling strong again. Now, there's another layer to this that people don't really talk about, and it's probably going to make some people feel uncomfortable or a little pressed, but it needs to be said. The best builds in ESO, a lot of them are not on YouTube. And I don't mean that in some gatekeeping elitist way, I mean it in a very practical, real sense, because what gets posted publicly is not always what gets used privately. Think about how YouTube works for a second. Content needs to be clear, repeatable, easy to explain, easy to showcase, and most importantly, it needs to perform. So what kind of builds do you think get posted? The ones that are easy to replicate, look good on a dummy, have clean numbers, are simple to present, not necessarily the ones that perform the best in real fights. And then there's another reality people don't consider. Some creators don't actually run the exact builds they post, or they'll tweak things before uploading. Not in some malicious way, but because, well, they're testing variations. They're protecting what's actually working, or they're simplifying something for the audience. So what you end up getting is a version of the build, not always the final version. Timu full skankers. And this isn't even a knock on creators. It's just the nature of making content. Because the most optimized builds, a lot of the time, well, they're harder to play, more situational, more reactive, and less clean. They don't always parse well, they don't always look impressive in a short clip, but in real fights, they outperform. There's also a knowledge gap that happens when you copy a build, because when someone makes a build, they understand why everything is there. They know when to be aggressive, when to hold resources, when to switch playstyles, when to adapt. But when you copy it, you're copying the structure, not the understanding behind it. So even if the build is solid, it won't perform the same in your hands yet. That's why YouTube is amazing for learning. It gives you a foundation, a starting point, an idea of what works. but it's not the final answer, and it was never meant to be. The players who really start improving are the ones who move past copying and start adjusting. They ask, what is this build missing for me? Where am I struggling? What do I need more of in real fights? Because your environment, your skill level, your playstyle, all of that changes what is actually optimal. So if you've been copying builds and wondering why they don't feel right, that's probably why. You're using a version of something without tailoring it to your reality. And once you start making those adjustments, that's when your build actually becomes yours. And that's when it starts working. Also want to add, CMX is a great way to test damage numbers, resistances, all that stuff. And it's actually the best way to push your build to a further, to a higher level. That's how I make a lot of my builds. Well, my builds that I haven't posted or I don't post. Because they're my best builds. And yeah, it takes a lot of time and work to push those numbers and scale them up higher. But listen, guys, it's harder. Yeah, it's harder to do CMX. It's harder it takes longer, but you're gonna perform better on a build that you've tailored yourself to fit exactly what you need to survive and do damage, than finding some YouTube build that is pretty basic. And most YouTube builds too are the same stuff. I'm guilty of it too. I've posted quite a few different builds, especially with DK, that is like the same setups that everybody else is using. So that being said, actually putting in time on a build, fully optimizing it using CMX, testing it over and over again, those are the best ways for you to learn how to build. But yeah, if you like this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And drop your build below. Tell me what feels off about it, tell me what feels right, and I'll help you actually fix it. Also want to add to it, this is not a knock at any creator. Obviously, you know, not everything's going to be ran the exact same way every time. A lot of in-game PvPers and PvEers will swap skills during fights, etc, etc. So that's what I refer to whenever it's not the final versions, because the builds change depending on the situation. But that's why understanding builds and not copying exactly is what's important. Knowing what skills to swap out, etc, etc. But anyways, if you like this video, back in English, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next video.